Welcome to our final Q&A for this retreat on the 7 Factors of Enlightenment. So please ask any questions you have, because this is the last occasion in this retreat, and then there will be a final wrap-up talk at 7 p.m. Pacific time after this. But let's not waste time. Get on with the first question there, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question is from Brian in Johannesburg, South Africa. What is the difference between Pasadi, tranquility, and Upeka, equanimity?
Pasadi is serenity, but Upeka has something like 9 types of Upeka, Upeka meaning equanimity. One of the similes the Buddha gives for Upeka, equanimity, is as the great earth does not react, whatever is thrown upon it. So Upeka is non-reactivity. Sometimes garbage is thrown on the great earth, oil spills, etc. Loathsome, obnoxious things are thrown upon the earth. It does not react. And then sometimes rose petals are scattered upon the earth. So the earth is non-reactive, and it's massive as well, the feeling of massiveness. So equanimity is a virtue, and it has there are two kinds. One is the absolute stillness. Sometimes they use this simile of a gymnast, the type of Upeka where a gymnast stands on one hand perfectly still for a few seconds is one type of equanimity that would be found in the 4th jhana, the deepest state of samadhi. And then the kind of equanimity where the gymnast does 10 backflips in a row and a double reverse twisting somersault at the end. That is Upeka in motion, and which would be the kind of Upeka of wisdom, which is maintained in all of the various interactions in the world. So Upeka, equanimity, is a philosopher's virtue as well. And you'll see in history that some philosophers, including the Buddha and many of the enlightened disciples of the Buddha at the time, encountered awkward and difficult situations, both illness and difficult people and threats to their well-being and insults, etc. And they conducted themselves with great aplomb and balance, equanimity. They didn't return anger for anger, etc. So that's the equanimity in motion. And then they park themselves under a tree and become absolutely still for sometimes days at a time. And that's the deep equanimity of samadhi. Pasadi is junior high school. It is an interesting term. In fact, it has very little descriptions or play in the suttas. It's very interesting to find it in the 7 Factors of Enlightenment. Pasadi is a kind of a serenity, and there'd be some equanimity in it as well. But it is the nearest I can find in the commentaries is this Upachara Samadhi, in the neighborhood of concentration, and I believe I went into that in the last talk, that Upachara Samadhi is not really a term found in the Pali Canon, but mostly in the commentaries. And Pasadi is actually rarely used, but it is probably what the commentary describes as Upachara Samadhi, the neighborhood of Samadhi. You're in the Samadhi is like a gated neighborhood, and you're on the nice clean streets just outside that neighborhood. It's nice. It's not noisy. It's clean and bright, so very pleasant. But doesn't qualify quite for samadhi. Otherwise, it would be samadhi. So it's somewhere close to samadhi, but more or less would be described as a serene personality manifestation. Something like that, yeah.
Our next question is from the live chat from Bodhipala here at Birken, British Columbia, Canada. Could the transition from joy to pasadi to samadhi also be understood less as the movement from access to first jhana and more as the smoothing out of energy, marking the transition to, quote, full samadhi in second jhana?
Yeah, who knows? The precision regarding this is very difficult to find. Perhaps in the Abhidhamma they might have a better refined description of this. But some of the terms in the suttas are fairly vague. The best way to understand any of these things are through the similes. And the similes, they're the pictures. It's like going on Google and typing in something you want to know about serenity, but clicking on images rather than all. So type it in, serenity, and then click on images, and you will find out what similes are. The pictures of the world, pictures of the inner world. So pasadi is some form of serenity. I guess most of us know what that means, sort of, and it doesn't have a lot of precision around it. And then once you get into these supernormal states called the jhanas or the true samadhi, then there's more details. The first jhana has 5 kind of characteristics, but there is a sutta where the Buddha says, these 5 that I usually name, a person with great acuity and wisdom like Sariputta, he sees more in the first jhana. He sees like 12. So there are, Sariputta rhymes off like 12 7 other characteristics of the first jhana. So we shouldn't think that everything is exhaustively described in the suttas, but in some ways the Buddha is wise enough not to bog people down in the details either. Good descriptions are enough but not too much, and good teachers teach enough but not too much. There. Now let's go on. There.
Next question is from Jesse in Los Angeles, California, United States. I am wondering at what point it is better to stop naming things like metta and joy and just to acknowledge the feeling of them and move accordingly. I think the words may identify what is going on, but soon prove to be a distraction.
Who's that?
Jesse.
Jesse, you're right. Absolutely. You stop naming those things and get on with it. Yeah, no, absolutely. Words get in the way. It's the feeling. We want the feeling. We don't want we want the food, not the menu. So the menu are all these words, including this recitation of the loving kindness sutta and all of this. These are just words. They're recipes in a cookbook. So it ain't the food. You're going to starve to death if you just keep reading that cookbook over and over. But the words, hopefully the words have a lot of connotations. They make you drool for loving kindness. It sounds delicious. So they get on with the actual experience of loving kindness. Yeah, words, the little formulas that teachers give you. May I be well, happy, and peaceful. May I this, and may I have this, and may all people be happy, and so forth. These are just words, Now, what does it mean? It only means anything if you feel it. What is that? What is the feeling of that? How does it feel? You got to transition from the descriptions to the feeling. Yeah.
Next question is from the live chat from Mendo Maiko. Dear Ajahn Sona, does cultivation of the 7 factors describe the path to its completion, or is it more of a foundation? What difficulties lie beyond the development of these factors?
There's a little tag on the end of the the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. So Maha means the grand, Sati means mindfulness, and Patthana means foundations. The Great Sutta on the foundations of mindfulness has a kind of an addendum on the end. It says, whoever develops these four foundations of mindfulness, it has a fruition in the seven factors of enlightenment, and when they're cultivated and developed, they have a fruition in the Eightfold Path, and the Eightfold Path has a fruition in right knowledge and release. So even the Eightfold Path there is a tenfold path. I hate to disturb everybody by telling them this after think, what? I've heard everything about the Eightfold Path. Now you come up with a tenfold path. Well, there are two more factors. Right knowledge and release are what the Eightfold Path results in, because after all, the Eightfold Path ends at samadhi, right concentration, but that's not liberation, is it? We all know that, don't we? We all know that. So right knowledge and liberation is tagged on at the end. So they all work as bridges, as stepping stones. One thing completes and pushes you over into the next thing. So that's the function of the seven factors of enlightenment. And in the not too far distant future, I'm going to give a retreat called the 37 Requisites of Enlightenment. We're going to throw everything in, including the kitchen sink, into this. And by the way, in this retreat, for those who like puzzles, how many of the 37 factors did I mention in this retreat on the seven factors? I won't give you the answer for that, but send in your answers there. How many of the other ones did I mention? Yeah. Onwards, yes.
Okay. Next question is from Malcolm in Tbilisi, Georgia. At each stage of enlightenment, is it the same insight of knowing anicca, dukkha, anatta, or does one know at the event which stage it is? Is each time one sees the Dhamma a subsequent stage, or can one see the Dhamma and either A, not become a stream winner, or B, stay in the same stage and not move into the next stage?
Well, that's a good question. I want to recommend that you listen to my talks on the stages of enlightenment. So there's, how many? Is it just one talk on the stages of enlightenment? Yeah, it's on this YouTube channel, and full description of the stages and what happens at each stage. So there's some details about how one transitions between each stage of enlightenment. It's all the stages of enlightenment are what happens when the truth of reality is revealed to a person, and it's always on one of those three characteristics: the tilakkhana, the three marks of existence: anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anicca being impermanence, dukkha unsatisfactoriness, or we could say suffering, and anatta, the most mysterious, the lack of identity or substance, especially self-substance, the lack of a substantial self, soul, essence. And it's this sudden realization about this that sweeps through a person's whole structure of how they view reality that produces a stage of enlightenment. And it's just to the degree that they see it and have the full implication of it that determines how far they've gone. And how do we determine what stage is how many of the fetters, the primary bondages to normal view of reality have been severed. So there are 10 of these types of bonds or chains that all unenlightened people have and it has to do with their view of reality. And obviously, this is a very common view of reality. It seems to be natural to humans. Enlightenment is not natural to humans. It's a very different view of things. And if you're into physics and so forth, it's kind of Newtonian. Even Newtonian physics is kind of counterintuitive, let alone the physics of relativity, the idea of curved space, and that time is different for people depending on how fast they're moving through space, and all of this kind of stuff is like, wow, that's not our normal intuition about space and time. It's not normal. It takes quite a thing to get your head around, but that apparently is how it really is. And the degree that a person becomes comfortable with that is the degree that sort of they really have understood that system of ways of thinking about reality. And this is the same with these stages of enlightenment. There are 4 stages of enlightenment, and it has to do with how many of the old habit tendencies of how to view reality have really been dissolved completely, and you're walking around in a different world. This would be, cultural enlightenment happens as well. There was a time when heavy racial discrimination was thought totally normal and real, and then a revolution in how we see other races came by, and some people could move on and some people couldn't. They couldn't get over their perceptions. The perception of a flat earth versus a spherical earth, some people could move on, some people couldn't. Justification of wars, political systems, somebody hardcore communist for a while, and then they become a capitalist, or they are raised in a sort of capitalistic society, and they become convinced of Marxism, and they have a complete revolution in terms of their thinking. See, these are kind of similar structures to Enlightenment. Not that I'm comparing Marxism to Enlightenment, or capitalism. Neither of those are Enlightenment. The French Revolution, this scientific revolution in Europe, is called the Enlightenment. Starts in the 17th century, and it's called the Enlightenment. But it's not. It is a different way of looking at things. It's democracy versus aristocracy or monarchy. A different way of ruling ourselves, different views of reality. And these are radical shifts in perception and how a person functions and sees things. So this is what enlightenment is. And to the degree that it seeps in and really actually you are comfortable in the new reality, that's the degree that you have achieved that state of enlightenment. But I'll leave it to you to go and watch the talk on stages of enlightenment. Yeah.
Next question is from the live chat from Adicita in Alberta, Canada. I find it interesting that the Buddha enters parinibbana by cycling through the various jhana states. Ajahn Punadhammo explained that jhana is like simplifying the mind, stopping thinking, deep tranquility, silence, emptiness. The joy is otherworldly, like from the highest Brahma realms, and the highest jhanas go even beyond. Then nibbana must be even beyond that. Would you kindly comment?
Yeah, I'm not sure that all of our listeners are familiar with this, but this is the Parinibbana Sutta, the last, the death of the Buddha. The last days of the Buddha. So he was ill and he was dying, and near the end and here's a little bit of a problem. He goes through the jhanas. There are actually 8, so I won't complicate it, but the 4 standard rupa jhanas, and then there's arupa or formless jhanas, So he goes up through the 8 jhanas, and he goes back down, and then he goes back up to the 4th jhana and departs. And so and somehow somebody knows this. Like, how does anybody know? Is the Buddha explaining all this while he's doing it? See, and by the way, here's the other problem, is that nobody is supposed to be able to access a Buddha's mind, because the law of the universe is that a higher consciousness can perceive or understand or embrace a lower consciousness, but a lower consciousness cannot embrace or understand a higher consciousness. So you can understand what it's like to be a child, because you've been a child, but a child can't understand what it's like to be an adult. And if you're a really great musician, you can understand what it's like to be not so great, but a person who's a bad musician can't understand the nature of being a great musician. This is in the moral dimension as well. One of the things the Buddha says is, somebody asks him, can a bad person know that another person is bad? Can a bad person know if another person is good? And the Buddha answers, it is impossible. It cannot be that a bad person can know if another person is bad. It is impossible. It cannot be that a bad person can know if another person is good. Well, can a good person know if another person is bad? Can a good person know if another person is good? It is possible and likely that a good person can know if another person is bad. It is possible and likely that a good person can know if another person is good. So this is bad people, like morally bad people, don't know they're bad. And they don't know, if they don't know they're bad, they don't know if anybody else is bad or good either, because they have no experience of this. So a person who has no tonal capacity is what do you call that? Tin ear, or like a Johnny One Note. The kid at the back of the class that's supposed to mouth the words but not sing along. He can't tell if a person is singing on tune. But if you can sing on tune, then you can tell if a person's not singing in tune. So I don't know in this story how anybody could possibly know what was going on in the mind of the Buddha as he lay dying, as he's passing up and down through all of these stages of jhana. So we just have to take it on trust that apparently maybe the Buddha displayed it somehow to people. And I think it's just to say that where I'm going is not within the conceivable universe. And this is the other thing that the Buddha said at the end of his life. And I want everybody who's listening to know what the Buddha said. He says, after my death, neither gods nor humans will see me. I'm not going to heaven. I'm not going to, no rebirth. Very strong, clear, I'm not somewhere. You won't see me, nobody's going to see me after my death. So this is their way of saying that in the sutta. He takes a little journey around the known universe, the supernormal universe, from the 1st jhana to the 8th and back, and then departs, because he's not going anywhere that those jhanas lead. By the way, so the 4 jhanas lead to rebirth in a state of fine material, in a fine material heaven, a contemplative heaven sort of experience. And the arupa jhanas, the jhanas 5 to 8, result in a formless heaven type of experience. Quite hard to imagine whatever it is, but it's a type of existence. So he is departing, showing that he's not going to any of those places. He is attaining parinibbana, which is something not followed by birth in any of those realms. Okay, let's go on.
Next question is from Chloe in Portland, Oregon, United States. What parts of one's personality survive the process of developing these factors of enlightenment? It seems like worldly interests are a big part of people's personality, identity.
Yes. There's a couple of things to say about that. It's like some people worry. When I started meditating, I was a musician. I was a classical musician, and that was my training and so forth. And I had no idea that I was going to end up as a monk. And maybe if you told me at the time that, if you keep this meditation stuff up, you're going to lose interest in music. You're not going to be a musician. You're going to just walk away. I might have said, well, I better stop this meditation stuff because that doesn't sound like a good idea. I put in years and years and years and years of life into becoming a musician, and you're telling me I'm going to lose interest in it. So this is some people's concern, is that if you keep meditating and actually succeed at the meditation, it demotivates you about normal worldly kind of interests. Your interests in these things just tend to fall away. Doesn't mean that your knowledge about them falls away. You can still do mathematics perfectly well, or spell, or write, or do any of these things perfectly well, but you're just not interested in them. It's not of vital interest anymore. So this is how it goes. Now there's another thing called a vasana, and that is a leftover personality tendency. And this occurs even in those who are fully enlightened. The arahants, the fully enlightened person, still has leftover personality tendencies, which they may have cultivated for lifetimes, but which are empty of passion. They're empty of motivation. So these are little past life personality tendencies that have still a kind of active, but not motivated in any way of clinging or craving or desire or aversion or anything like this. So that's a very brief explanation of that. So you'll find, with the great enlightened teachers and so forth, that they have particular personalities, but it's more or less like a show. They're just playing a part. It's like an actor. They're not really that character. Yeah.
Next question is from the live chat from Raphael in California, United States. How can we know the teachings we receive on enlightenment are those of the historical Buddha? My understanding is that the Pali Canon was established 500 years after his passing.
Well, a great deal of historical inquiry has been put into this question, of course. In Asia, and especially in Buddhist countries, they were somewhat shocked to hear that anybody had any doubts about the actual existence of the Buddha. So when the British first came to India, they were curious about all this Hinduism and stuff, and they came across Buddha statues, and they thought he was a fictional character, some sort of god or something like that. In fact, some of the Indians also thought he was an avatar or something, of kind of a quasi-deity, or Buddhism had left India quite some time before. And it was only after some archaeology and so forth that the British began to think, this guy might have been a historical character. So this is going on in Christian studies since the 19th century. In the West, the historical historical reality of Jesus was just accepted. It was just totally accepted. And then sometime in the 19th century, they started really doing critiques of the New Testament, and finally some said, "Oh, well, he didn't even exist. This guy is not a historical character." And so that's kind of a more skeptical kind of view of things. Plato and Socrates. Did Socrates actually exist, or is he just a mouthpiece for Plato? Did Plato invent Socrates? And on and on. We have a lot of evidence that Socrates existed, and Plato existed, and Aristotle existed, and so forth, and Julius Caesar existed, and certainly Alexander the Great. Now, Alexander the Great invades India. And so we find evidence of Buddhism far earlier through statuary and inscriptions and ideas than the time of the Pali Canon when it was written down, so-called written down. It's written down. I've actually visited the monastery where it was apparently written down, and they even have the implements and the type to show how it was written down, and it was written on ola leaves, which last about 1,500 years. Our modern paper is like a couple hundred years, and ola leaves last longer than that. It's like papyrus scrolls and so forth that are sealed in vases and so forth that last. Anyway, how it was preserved was through group recitation. And the Vinaya and the communities and the buildings, etc., of the early period were preserved through large groups of monks and nuns reciting by memory the suttas. And in fact, group recitation of suttas, which was the preferred method in India, they didn't trust writing so much because all it takes is a scribal error. One person writing at midnight who's a little dopey, being paid to write down something that they don't believe in, and they put the wrong word in there, and then you got two pieces of writing side by side, and which one do you believe? Whereas if you have 50 people sit down and recite the national anthem, you will find that the 50 people get the words right. One of them may have the wrong word, and they'll find out that they got the wrong word instantly. So large group recitation is a very good way of preserving things. Why did they write it down at all? Is because at the time in Sri Lanka, the Buddhism had come down through India and was also vitally in Sri Lanka. And around the 1st century BC, there was a lot of unsettled invasions and problems. And there were fewer and fewer monks, and there was a lot of turmoil, and they were worried about group recitation, not that some groups of monks wouldn't be able to remember it. So they decided to get together as a group and write down the entire Pali Canon. Now, by the way, it's often said that this is the first time the Pali Canon was written down. That's a misunderstanding. It just means that is on occasion when the entire Pali Canon was set in writing. Was it put down before that? Were parts of it put down in writing before that? We do not know. We don't have strong evidence, but there are inscriptions in stone, etc., that indicate that writing was known earlier than that, and that some things were written down. Did individuals write parts of it down before? Maybe. Anyway, this let me just compare it a bit to the New Testament, the Bible. That is set down by individuals. The New Testament, the 4 Gospels, are written down by people who never met Jesus. And they're individuals. And that's why you see a lot of contradictions and discrepancies between them. This was not and by the way, so Christ was only teaching for a few years, if he existed, and I think historically he probably is a historical figure that was around. What he said, we're not too sure, but the Buddha is around for apparently 45 years teaching till he was 80 years old, in good health, giving thousands of talks to thousands and thousands of well-trained monks who are memorizing his teachings and preserving it. And so when they write it down, it's not just one guy with a candle at midnight writing this down. It's an entire group, large group, reciting it and inscribing it. So it's a very different method for preserving history. So that's the story we have, and there's every reason to believe that it's approximately true. Now, there is a few suttas in the Pali Canon that maybe there's good reason to think that they were later, they were post-Buddhist and so forth, and we examine them very carefully. We examine the language, we examine the events described and so forth. But the vast bulk of the Pali Canon is fairly reliable, and you might want to read a book called The Early Buddhist, Authenticity of the Early Buddhist Texts by Ajahn Sujato and Brahmali, yes. Ajahn Sujato and Brahmali, they've done a good job looking at the authenticity of the early Buddhist texts, because we Westerners are very skeptical about history. Oh my gosh, yeah. Did that happen? Did that happen? Yeah. Okay, next.
Next question is from Rick in Elizabeth, Indiana, United States. Ajahn Sona, what are ways to recognize when we are transitioning from the more energetic joy in first jhana to more tranquil happiness and equanimity of the later jhanas?
Well, these are something to be experienced. And by the way, when we casually talk about these jhanas and so forth, as if everybody's going to, now class, let's all go into the first jhana. Occasionally, some teacher decides that, we come for the weekend, we'll learn to do the jhanas up to the fourth jhana, and then you go home. And so, it ain't that way. It's very clear in Buddhist history that it's very difficult to do. And it's clear from much talk with both lay meditators and monks who have been in the robes for years that this is not a piece of cake. This is not easy to do. This is virtuoso stuff. It's supernormal. It's classified as a supernormal attainment to actually be able to enter these things. So don't get casual about it. The biggest mistake you can make is to assume that you've attained jhana when you haven't. What a terrible way to deprive yourself of something. People do this with music. They think they're wonderful piano player who's thumping out 3 chords. Don't limit yourself by presuming that you can do things that really you cannot. There's much more to do with this. There is much more progress to make. It's better than you think. So it's better than you think. And when you get there, you will know the difference between your joy and your serenity. It will be clear to you.
Next question is from the live chat from Anonymous in Perth, Australia. Dear Ajahn Sona, could you recommend a collection of volumes or books a lay practitioner should have available to assist on their journey towards enlightenment?
Yes, it'd be easier to recommend books that you should ignore. There's a huge collection of trash proposing to describe Buddhism and so forth, just terrible stuff, misdirection, and there's all kinds of schools of Buddhism as well. First thing you have to understand is there are schools of Buddhism that are wildly different from each other. So the perspective I'm teaching from or speaking from is early Theravada, and primarily the early suttas of the Pali Canon. And I'm somewhat, a little bit critical of some of the later commentaries, which are considered to be part of the Theravada school as well. But certainly I'm not answering from a Mahayana perspective. I'm not answering from a Zen perspective, from a Tibetan, Vajrayana, or any of those perspectives, and certainly not the Pure Land perspective, which is classical of Japanese Buddhism, some Chinese Buddhism. None of those am I talking from. And it should be clear that I'm talking from a particular point of view, from a particular school, which I have migrated to. I have gone through the other schools. I've also gone through a lot of Western. I'm born and raised in a Western Christian culture, and I know that. I read the entire Bible. I've heard all that stuff, and I'm not convinced at all by that. And I'm not Islamic. I'm not Christian. I am not a Greek philosopher. I am a particular early Sutta Buddhist is what I am. And that any recommendations would be always that, to familiarize yourself with that school so that you actually you start to be able to distinguish as a Westerner between these schools. It's like a Japanese person hearing about Christianity, and they are all mixed up between Mormons and the Catholic Church and the Seventh-day Adventists. Like they think it's all Christianity. One day they're reading the Book of Mormon, and the next day the sort of fundamentalist tracts of Seventh-day Adventists, and the next one they're reading the medieval philosophers of the Catholic Church. How to confuse yourself completely. It's the same with Buddhism. Sort out your schools first. Get a grasp of this and understand they're not all saying the same thing. These are Buddhist religions. There isn't such a thing as a Buddhist religion. There's Buddhist religions, as there are many sects of Christianity and so forth. So you got to straighten out, what am I reading here? What am I? Then I recommend Bhikkhu Bodhi's The Noble Eightfold Path. And I also recommend that you take our Upasaka course, a 1-year course in getting the basics of early Theravada Buddhism, how it's practiced and some perspective on it. A full year of monthly assignments and readings and so forth. Check our website out. Read Bhikkhu Bodhi's Eightfold Path, some of these sort of central things, and then something of the Pali Canon, which is available online through Wisdom Publications, etc. Yeah.
Next question is from the live chat from Raphael in California, United States. Why is it taboo to ask if a teacher is enlightened? Shouldn't we want to learn from those who can transmit the teachings more authentically?
It's not taboo to ask, it's taboo to answer. So it's specifically a rule for Theravada monks, again, all what are referred to as Buddhist monks. Quite often in Zen schools, you will find the reference to a Zen monk, and you find out that the Zen monk is married and has 3 kids. And that's not what I call a monk, by definition. In the West and in some parts of Asia, it's a very hazy bit of business. So the Bhikkhu order, the order of ordained monks, has a very clear prescription about what is a valid ordination. And then we have what's called a Vinaya, or rules of conduct for monks. And one of the things that you're not supposed to tell lay people, is if you're enlightened. You're not supposed to declare your attainments. Even if they're true, you shouldn't be saying them. You can talk to other monks about that, fully ordained monks, and hopefully who are qualified to have any thoughtful opinions about it, because not all monks are. Monks, it's fairly easy to enter the robes. You got to be 20 years old and have all your fingers and toes, basically, and you can pretty well get in a day in Thailand. So that person that may be completely unqualified to even discuss anything about Dhamma. This person is going to spend some years, like at least an undergraduate at university, before they even wander around a little bit. So this is this is why monks are not supposed to be saying this. What we're supposed to be doing is just pointing to the relevant information. If we have some knowledge about it, and not all monks do, and in fact, not, most monks don't have a thorough overlook of the substantial teachings of the Buddha until they've been in the robes for quite some time, and some of them will never have it. It's just not, that's not part of your ordination structure. Some people inform themselves and have a good breadth of knowledge and can teach and direct people, and some don't. So just asking monks, are you enlightened? Are you enlightened? And so if it's just like, what's your IQ? What's your IQ? It's kind of like, it's like that, So, you can ask, but don't expect answers. It's not really relevant. And besides, why would you believe a monk if he said, I'm enlightened? Why would you believe him? Do you do a blood test on him? How are you going to confirm it? Somebody tells you, oh, my IQ is 200. Well, how are you going to know this, so forth. Just set that aside and worry about your own practice, and that the monk's reputation is established by their capacity to behave themselves within the Vinaya capacity. If they're misbehaving according to the Vinaya, then they may not be a good candidate as your teacher. So this is kind of a rough answer to that.
Next question is from the live chat from Lee in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. Yesterday you talked about one-pointedness. Please explain why one can't reach samadhi by attention to, say, a hockey game or writing poetry.
Well, you can reach samadhi by this means, but it's the wrong samadhi. So in fact, the Buddha does describe that as, in fact, I think it's very useful that we have such a thing as wrong samadhi, because you could see you're watching a hockey game or you're listening to your favorite song or a symphony or something, and you're enraptured by it. You're joyful and focused, and you forget to eat, and you don't hear the traffic outside, and your aches and pains in your body are gone. So these are samadhi factors, but they're based on the wrong topic. So as soon as the hockey game's over, then you can't wait for the next one, and you're kind of lost and so forth. So this is a worldly type of attention, and people, that's why they listen to music and watch hockey games and so forth, because they like it. It really feels good. So these are samadhi factors, but they're on the wrong subject. They won't get you anywhere. So we want to explore this, but we want to learn. Say, if you have the capacity to actually enjoy yourself watching hockey, good luck with that. I don't know. I don't understand you. But that's a little Canadian inside joke for you. The watching hockey is the national whatever. I don't know what it is. The national what?
Passion.
Passion, yes. Yeah. I'm not a passionate Canadian. Anyway, it's wrong samadhi, but learn from that what meditation amounting to samadhi are those positive feelings that you get in wrong samadhi. So that's a very useful thing to know. And I think we'll wind her down. So tonight there is a talk at 7 p.m. Pacific time, and if you are not being taken out to the New Year's party, you'll have to stay with me and celebrate New Year's early. Have some Perrier and lime instead of a champagne. No alcohol for you. And our next live stream, we have this regular weekly live stream, that we've been doing for a couple of years now, and we will take a couple of weeks off from that. My hardworking background crew here needs some rest because they put together many, many talks and stuff this month, and We will be back on January the 15th, which is a Sunday, at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. Pacific time, resuming our questions and answers. So you can write in and get your answers, your questions answered. And so that's it for the 7 factors. But stay tuned tonight for the last talk.